Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, I'm excited to revisit a project that I worked on last September. It's a special request from a client who is also creative at heart. She loves making macrame bracelets, and she asked me to create a custom bezel pendant with not one but two bales, and I was thrilled to take the challenge. So, before we dive in, my intention is to share a technique that I've learned and modified, which is it has been working very well for me, but it's not always working for everybody. I don't claim to know everything for sure, so let's treat this video as a creative journal that you can follow along with and hoping that it will benefit for you. So, without further ado, let's see how this project unfolds. Let's go.
This is how the pendant looked like in the end. The name of the stone is green moss agate, 8 times 10 millimeter dimension. For far it look oval, but the top part is rather narrow. If you like to buy the same of this kind of stone online, try using the keyword oval natural shape. By the way, I bought this lot on Etsy from a stone cutter. So since we are not sure how to calculate the perimeter of the stone, I'm using a yarn that I encircle around the stone and measure the length afterward using the ruler. It says here around 3.5 centimeter. Next, I want to decide the thickness of the bezel wall. The cut of this stone is very particular. It has a pavilion, but the killet is not pointy, but rather flat. I'm going to use the help of a ruler and pretend that there is no pavilion, but instead a real flat back, like how the rose cut would look like. Now that I think about it, I should set this stone differently. I'm using a divider to measure the thickness of this stone. I also add 1.3 millimeter thickness below for the back of the bezel. I'm not sure what is the height I should add after the pavilion. This is something to think about in the future. For this work right here, I'm adding between 1 to 2 millimeter. Once I get the thickness and the width, I cut my silver. This is 28 gauge silver sheet. The divider will help with leaving a light marks on the sheet for it to be cut later. I'm more comfortable cutting anything with scissors rather than the saw, so this metal shears comes in very handy. Now I have the strip is ready. I'm just going to encircle it around the perimeter of the stone slowly. I know that you saw me measuring the perimeter earlier, but I guess I changed my mind. I would prefer to do this again. I heard this saying, measure twice, cut once. I guess I'm doing it right now. The stone seems to be very slippery, so I'm going to use this piece of double tape so it can be sticked onto the V-slot while I measure the strip. And I'm going to mark it with the Sharpie so that I know where I can cut it. The idea of the bezel is that so it can snug fit, not too large, not too tight. Once they're cut, then I'm filing the two edges for soldering work. This is my habit. I'm going to tell you, I have a tendency to cut too small, so it's too snug fit. So I don't want to repeat the same mistake. Let's talk about another trick that I'm using. I file both edges, then I bring them together closely and gently by pushing one against another to ensure a tight fit. Once they are touching, I slip a nail file in between the gap and just I file some more. Yes, it's typically unavailable in jewelry supply stores, but it's fantastic for this purpose. It is sturdy because it's made out of metal. It's very thin and perfectly flat. It allows me to file both edges to ensure they meet in the middle. If you'd rather not sacrifice your nail file, you can use 100 grit sandpaper instead. Soldering a bezel is the most challenging part because the sheet is 28 gauge, which is very thin, and since this isn't the smallest stone, it's still quite tiny and very easy to melt. I simply place the solder chip under the gap and then heat it up. Once the solder melts, I just spray the piece with water to quench it. I will only put it in the pickle bath once the solder work is done. Next, I create the backing using 16 gauge wire to maintain an open back. Previously, I used a silver sheet to build a bezel for a turquoise stone, resulting in a closed back. However, since this stone is transparent, I believe an open back design is a better choice. I have the bezel around the stone and work on forging the 16 gauge wire slowly, bending the wire 1 millimeter per millimeter until the edges meet. Okay, they're now meeting in the middle. It's time to cut. File the edges so it will be soldered together onto the bezel. I forgot to tell you that in order to make the open bag, I'm using the round nose pliers. Here, I'm using a ring clamp to hold the ring while filing the edges using the Dremel cutting disc. Make sure it is closed with tension, and I'm using my old trick again, which is the nail file I talked about earlier. And right now, the moment of truth. Click! This seems fit. For some reason, I love it when it gives a click sound. Let's solder these together. Make sure that the ring is placed all the way down. Place the piece upside down on the soldering board. I then add a couple of solder chips along the seam, four to be precise actually, just to be safe. Note that the backing of the bezel wasn't soldered separately. I'm doing this to save time. Sometimes when using a hard solder twice, there's a risk that the first solder will melt. I also put a lot of flux before soldering. This isn't appearing in the video, somehow I forgot to record it. So when you solder, I would advise you to be patient. Don't fire too intensely. Remember to give the piece a break from a direct fire. Just for reference, I'm recording this at 4x. So yes, the real process takes a lot longer than how it is in the video. Okay, now I'm going to make the bail using 18 gauge wire. The idea is that the bail has to be large enough in case she wants to put a thicker macrame. I like how the bail look like. Right now, I'm pretty much just filing the both edges using the cutter disc before I'm soldering it into the bezel. In order to hold the bail in place while soldering, I'm putting it in between these two iron weights. You can use other materials as long as the melting point is higher than the melting point of a silver. So iron and titanium, for example, works great. I'm soldering one bail at a time, and this one seems super stubborn. I have a feeling that the chunky iron cylinder is absorbing all the heat. So I learned my lesson here. I'm going to put the chip below the gap. And since it's already half soldered, I don't need to use any weight. It's successful, I think. Alright, done. The second bail to solder, I'm going to melt the soldering chip first before, and then we'll apply the half melted solder chip onto the gap. We'll see if it's working better here. Finally, everything is soldered and the piece is fully assembled. I don't have to solder anything else anymore. So this thing has been soaked in the pickle bath for a while. It still has a little bit of fire stain, but that's okay. I'm going to move on to the hard work, which is the sanding. I'm first going to sand the base, getting rid of the gap. Why is there still a gap? Because I was using a round wire for the back, so only the larger part of the diameter that is touching the bezel wall. So what happened to the small part of the diameter? Well, we will get rid of them by sanding. This is 80 grit sandpaper, very, very coarse. The key is to keep on moving while sanding. If I stay in one position, this thing will eat my bezel alive, so I really have to use it very carefully. And I'm alternating between the 80 grit sandpaper using the mandrel and also using the needle file. Once the part is rather smooth, I can move on to the 320 grit sandpaper to start sanding the process. I really don't know how to make this process shorter. I think there is no way to make this process shorter. So stuck up a lot of elbow grease and let's go. I'm going to spare you the boring part and choose to fast forward to sanding the top part of the bezel. First, I want to make sure that it's flat and smooth, so I'm doing it like this. And using the diamond bit, I'm cleaning up the inside too. First, to make it look clean, but also it will give a bit of a room for the stone. You didn't know this, but the stone seems to be a bit too snug fit inside the bezel. As of right now, I have gotten rid of the fire scale, the unevenness, and the stone fits perfectly into the bezel. I'm happy. Ooh, perfect. So what's next? Well, the smoothing process begin. I'm smoothing the top and bottom part with laying the 320 grit sandpaper on the table and just make a circular movement like this. Then using 320 grit sandpaper to really smoothen out the surface um, above and below. And then using the same uh, grit sandpaper, I'm going to smoothen the side of the bezel, which is the wall of the bezel. You can call that too. And it's a very repetitive step from 320 to 400, 600, and then move on to 800 and 1000, and then finally 1500. So fast forward again, the stone is going to be set right now. I'm using the bezel pusher. I feel like the bezel wall is too high actually. Now that I rewatched the process, I confirmed that the bezel might be a little bit too high. It envelops a lot on the edge of the stone, but I think I can save this. As you can see, it's has a lot of creases. I need to get rid of this with using this pumice, but is not 100% pumice. Somehow it is mixed with rubber, so this bit can still get rid of scratch, but also not too harsh. And moving on to the green color is the softer bit to smoothen the edge. Um, I have to be careful with this one because I need to cover my stone. This is super dangerous here. And finally, I'm rubbing it with the steel wool for a satin finished effect. And I cut the inside part of the bezel set to make it shiny. I don't know what its process called. Sorry, you guys. I'm just going to cut along the inside part slowly and finally burnish them by rubbing using the steel burnisher and pass again for the second time the steel wool for the satin finished. And then I'm done. So this is how the pendant looked like just after getting out of the ultrasonic bath. And take a look at the back side. I'm very happy with the back side here.
I hope this is not too confusing. I was able to smoothen out these nicks with a satin finish, better than the picture I shared earlier. I can't show you the finished piece right now since it's already been sent to its new home. And the good news is that she loves it. And I even received a 5-star review on Etsy for this order. Veronica, if you are watching this, I'm so happy and I'm so grateful. And me too, I love working with you. Thank you so much for watching until the end. I hope this inspires you to create your own bezel set. If you're interested in jewelry making, metal smithing, wire wrapping, or simple DIY projects, feel free to drop a comment below, subscribe to my channel, or give this video a like. Until next time, goodbye. It has nothing to do with jewelry making, but I want to show you my monstera is giving birth to a baby. I'm going to show you right now. Look. In a couple of days, I think it's going to be unrolled, and I will show you some more on the beautiful baby leaves. Well, I'm done here. Until next time, goodbye.